Conventional instruction for the forearms focuses on wrist curls and reverse wrist curls, with maybe some grip work thrown in as an afterthought. This implies that the flexors and extenders of the wrist make up the bulk of the forearm, and that the finger flexors are relatively minor muscles. Actually, not only is the opposite true, but that approach omits a potentially large part of the forearm, the brachioradialis. Now, the biomechanics below the elbow are complex compared to, say, the quad. The quad has a lot of meat, few attachments, and one or two functions. The forearm has a relatively small area, many attachments, many functions. Elbow flexion, wrist extension, pronation, supination, deviation, power grip, precision grip, plus what all the fingers do. Fortunately, these movements are created by different combinations of muscles, not separate muscles, so you don't have to do a separate exercise for each movement. A lot of the texts break the forearm muscles up into three groups: radial, volar ulnar, and dorso-ulnar, or in gym terms, reverse curl, reverse wrist curl. Unfortunately, those happen to be three badly designed exercises. Reverse curls first. First, the good. The reverse curl does target the brachioradialis. The radius is crossed over, so the bicep can't pull as efficiently. So the biggest, most superficial elbow flexor is the brachioradialis. There are two problems, though. First is the pronator teres. In order to grab the bar, you have to pronate, turn your palm down, and you can feel the pronator teres contracting with your thumb right here. Since the pronator teres is also an elbow flexor, that means it partially contracts to get the bar, and then it pulls into active insufficiency when you flex the elbow. So fatigue in the smaller pronator is going to interfere with your work for the larger brachioradialis. The second problem with the reverse curl is the thumb. Obviously, to get into position, your thumb goes under the bar and bears some of the load. This posture with the thumb opposite the fingers is called precision grip, used for accuracy and refinement of touch, such as threading a needle. This is the real significance of the opposable thumb, the capacity for precision work. The thumb adductor doesn't have the capacity for hypertrophy because it would interfere with the rest of the hand. When you look at a chart of the hand and forearm anatomy, you see how small the thumb adductor is versus the much larger finger flexors. The other major grip is called the power grip. Instead of the thumb being opposite the fingers, the thumb works to the side, maneuvers the object into the palm so that the larger finger flexors can exert the force. Now, dumbbell hammer curls solve both problems. You're using a power grip, so your thumb isn't a factor. You're only partially pronated, so the pronator teres pulling into active insufficiency isn't a factor. So it works the brachioradialis without a lot of extra noise. There are other aspects of the forearm, though, to look at. Here's why wrist curls and reverse wrist curls aren't the best way to train your forearms. Make a fist, and then bend it. If you're being honest, you can't maintain as tight a fist in flexion as you can in neutral. Think of a disarm in martial arts. You always force the wrist into flexion to open the grip, and then you remove the weapon. The answer is in the anatomy. There are deep wrist flexors that connect the forearm to the hand and cross the wrist. But the largest, most superficial muscle on this side, the flexor digitorum superficialis, the finger flexors, cross the wrist and the finger joints. So when you grip, it partially contracts, but then when you also bend the wrist, it pulls into active insufficiency. The old wrist curl instruction to squeeze the bar as tight as you can and then bend your wrists can't be done. You can either squeeze the bar as tight as you can, or you can bend the wrists, but not both. Let's look at the other side, wrist extension. If you've ever done these exercises, you know you have to use a significantly lighter weight to reverse wrist curl than to wrist curl. And again, with the martial arts, you know you can't wrist extension your way out of a joint lock. Again, in the anatomy, the finger extenders and wrist extenders are much smaller than the finger flexors and the wrist flexors. This wouldn't make sense to have much larger muscles on one side of the wrist than the other if the function of these muscles was to move the hands with force, but it's not. The role of the wrist extenders is to position the hand for a stronger grip by keeping the larger finger flexors away from active insufficiency. So if you want to work the larger finger flexor muscles and the deep wrist flexors and the smaller wrist extenders in one movement, it would be a gripping movement pulling into extension. All right, this is an unconventional gripping exercise using a freedom trainer. You could also use regular dumbbells. I prefer this to the old-fashioned hand grip exercise because with the hand grip exercise, while it does work the finger flexors, the other end of the hand grip cuts into your hand right where the finger tendons are trying to work. So what you're going to do, hold on to the handles of the dumbbells with the last joint of your hand, of the fingers, with your wrist bent into flexion. As you grip, as you make a fist, you're going to pull into wrist extension. Okay, so here's a little bit of a close-up of the action. Wrist flexion, hook grip, tighten the grip, and move into extension. Now, I wouldn't twist as part of the exercise, but just for demonstration purposes. You're in flexion with the hook grip, and now you close it up into extension. If you notice, you're not beating up on your thumb or the heel of your hand like you have to do with conventional hand grips. These two exercises, hammer curls and gripping into extension, should be enough for generally bigger forearms and a better grip with a lot less strain on your hands and fingers. Probably not enough for grip strength specialists. Things like pinch gripping and tearing a deck of cards in half, these things are impressive enough at face value, but when you study the biomechanics, they're even more impressive. If you're already doing those things, what are you watching me for? Besides, plenty of guys develop pretty good forearms without doing any of what I said.